Aliens picked Game 6 of the Stanley Cup final because their scanners said it was the least defended structure on the continent. No army, no weapons. Just 20,000 screaming fans and a sheet of ice. Their scanners did not account for a Zamboni driver named Walt Higgins, a hot dog vendor with a mustard cannon, and a mascot who had not lost a fight since high school. Within 4 minutes, the most advanced invasion fleet in 3-star systems would be begging for a timeout. If you love a story where overconfident aliens get humbled by ordinary people doing extraordinary things, hit that like button, subscribe so you never miss what happens next, and drop a comment telling me where you would want aliens to land. Now let's step onto the ice because this story is just getting started. The city of Las Vegas, Nevada, did not sleep on the night of June 14th. It buzzed. Every casino sign on the strip burned brighter than usual. Every sports bar was packed shoulder to shoulder, and T-Mobile Arena sat in the center of it all like a glowing silver drum, holding 18,500 people who had paid more for parking than some folks paid for rent. Outside, the desert heat refused to let go even after sundown, sitting heavy at 96 degrees, the kind of dry heat that made the air shimmer over the asphalt. Inside, the building was a different world entirely, cooled to a crisp 58 degrees to protect the most important sheet of ice in professional hockey. Game 6 of the Stanley Cup final had everyone in the building leaning forward in their seats. The Carolina Hurricanes led the series 3-2, and the Vegas Golden Knights were fighting to keep their season alive in front of a sold-out home crowd. The energy in the arena was the kind that made the hair on your arms stand up, a low roar that never fully quieted, rising and falling with every shot on goal. Out on the concourse, away from the noise of the crowd, life moved at its usual pace. Donna Pierce was working the third-level concession stand, slinging hot dogs faster than her coworkers could keep the buns stocked. She had worked every Golden Knights playoff run since the franchise was born, and she took her job about as seriously as anyone takes anything in this world. Down in the bowels of the arena, in a service tunnel that smelled like rubber and ice shavings, Walt Higgins sat behind the wheel of the Zamboni, waiting for the second intermission. Walt had been resurfacing ice in Las Vegas for 11 years, ever since the team moved into the building. He had seen fights, he had seen floods, he had seen a bachelor party try to propose at center ice during a stoppage in play. Nothing rattled Walt anymore, or so he believed. Up in Section 112, a maintenance electrician named Jimmy Caswell was halfway up a service ladder, trying to fix a flickering light above the scoreboard before the third period started. Jimmy was the kind of guy who fixed things that were not broken just because he was curious how they worked, and his supervisor had threatened to fire him at least 6 times for it. Nobody had ever followed through, because Jimmy always fixed the problem eventually, usually after making it slightly worse first. And down near the home bench, inside a thick golden costume with an oversized helmet, the team mascot known as Chance the Golden Knight pumped up the crowd between whistles, throwing T-shirts into the upper deck with a compressed air cannon that could put a shirt 40 rows up with frightening accuracy. The man inside the suit, a former college linebacker named Marcus Doyle, had worn that costume for 6 seasons and treated every appearance like it was the only job in the world that mattered. None of them knew that 72 miles above the Mojave Desert, a Vesh Dominion scout cruiser had been quietly orbiting Earth for the better part of 3 days, mapping energy signatures across North America. Their sensors had detected something strange coming from southern Nevada. A massive, concentrated pulse of electrical energy, crowd noise registering as something close to a coordinated chant, and an enormous dome-shaped structure radiating heat differently from anything surrounding it. To the Dominion's tactical computer, it looked exactly like a fortified command center, possibly even a weapons testing facility. Their analysts had never seen a hockey arena before, and frankly, nothing about the readings looked peaceful. The Dominion had already tried 2 other landing sites on Earth, and both had gone catastrophically wrong in ways their commanders still refused to discuss in official reports. This time, their new commander, a broad-shouldered officer named Commander Threll Vask, had convinced the fleet that this target was different, smaller, contained. Civilian even, based on the strange, repetitive cheering pattern in the audio feed. "This is not a military installation," Threll told his second-in-command, studying the readout on the bridge of the cruiser. "It is something the humans gather around for entertainment. We strike during their peak distraction, we secure the structure, and we send a message to the rest of this continent before they can organize a response." His second-in-command, a younger officer named Corv, hesitated before speaking. "Commander, our last two reports both noted that human civilians reacted with unexpected aggression." Threll waved off the concern with the confidence of someone who had read a summary instead of the full report. "Those were rural outposts, isolated. This is a city. Cities have order, cities have rules. There is nothing organized about people sitting in chairs cheering at a sheet of frozen water." He had no idea how wrong he was about to be. At 9:47 p.m. local time, with the third period 4 minutes old and the score tied at 2, the Vesh Dominion cruiser broke atmosphere directly above the Las Vegas Strip. And that decision, more than any other in the entire campaign, was about to become the worst mistake of Commander Threll Vask's career. The first sign that something was wrong came not from a sensor or a soldier, but from the jumbotron hanging above center ice. The massive screen flickered, the broadcast feed glitching into static for nearly 4 full seconds before snapping back. In the crowd, 18,000 people barely noticed, assuming it was some kind of technical hiccup. Jimmy Caswell, still perched on his ladder near the scoreboard, noticed immediately, because he had just watched the entire electrical system spike in a way that made no sense for a building running on a fully redundant power grid. "That ain't a breaker issue," Jimmy muttered to himself, climbing down faster than safety regulations recommended. Outside on the strip, valet attendants and tourists looked up as a long, dark shape slid silently across the night sky, blotting out the glow of nearby hotel signs for a brief moment before settling into a hover directly above the arena's roof. A few people pulled out their phones, assuming it was some kind of promotional drone or a new casino stunt. Nobody screamed yet, nobody ran. This was Las Vegas, after all, a city that had seen fireworks, fire-breathing volcanoes, and a man-based jump off a hotel for a marketing campaign. A strange shape in the sky barely registered as unusual. Inside the arena, the game continued. A Carolina forward dumped the puck into the corner, and the building roared as both teams scrambled for possession. Nobody on the ice noticed the ceiling-mounted speakers above Section 201 humming with a frequency that had nothing to do with the sound system. The Dominion cruiser deployed its boarding pod through what its scanners had identified as a structural weak point, a retractable section of roof used for ventilation and event lighting rigs. The pod descended silently, landing with a soft thud on the catwalk above the upper bowl, completely out of sight from the crowd below. 6 Dominion soldiers stepped out, their armor humming faintly, their weapons already primed. Commander Threll Vask followed last, surveying the cavernous space below him with something close to satisfaction. "This is larger than expected," he said into his comm. "Structural integrity appears strong. Possible bunker design." What he was actually looking at was a sold-out hockey arena mid-third period, but nobody had bothered to brief him on what a jumbotron was, or why 18,000 people would willingly scream at the same time for no apparent military reason. The first contact happened almost by accident. A Dominion soldier, moving along the upper catwalk to scan for what the ship's computer labeled "command personnel," lost his footing on a support beam slick with condensation from the arena's cooling system. He grabbed for balance, missed, and dropped his rifle. The weapon clattered down through an open maintenance grate and landed with a loud metallic crash directly behind the concession stand where Donna Pierce was restocking napkins. Donna did not scream. Donna had worked concessions through 3 building evacuations, 1 minor kitchen fire, and an incident involving a bachelorette party that the arena staff still referred to only as the Tuesday thing. She turned around, looked at the strange, glowing object on the floor, and picked it up the way anyone who has worked food service for 15 years picks up anything unfamiliar, with mild annoyance and zero fear. "If this is some kind of new t-shirt cannon, somebody's getting written up," she said, turning the rifle over in her hands. Above her, the Dominion soldier who had dropped it stared down through the grate in horror. His commander's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Report." "Why has contact been initiated?" The soldier, whose name translated roughly to Private Hask, did not have a good answer. "Sir, the weapon fell. A local female has retrieved it." There was a long pause on the comm. "Retrieve it?" Hask began climbing down through the service ladder built into the catwalk structure, moving as quietly as his armor allowed, which was not very quietly at all. By the time he reached the concourse level, Donna had already shown the rifle to two of her co-workers, who agreed it was, in fact, not a T-shirt cannon, but possibly some kind of prop from a halftime show nobody had told them about. That was when Hask stepped around the corner of the concession stand, 7 feet tall, armored, glowing faintly blue under the fluorescent lights, and said the first words any Dominion soldier had spoken directly to a human being in the city of Las Vegas. "Return the weapon or you will be neutralized." Donna looked at him for a long moment, then she looked at the rifle in her hand, then she looked back at him. "Honey," she said, "I have dealt with drunker, scarier, and taller than you on a Saturday night shift. Sit down before I call security." Hask did not sit down. Hask reached for the weapon. And that was the moment Donna Pierce, concession stand manager, 16-year employee of T-Mobile Arena, jammed an entire bottle of industrial mustard directly into the gap between his helmet and his chest plate, and squeezed with everything she had. The scream that followed was loud enough that, 3 sections away, Walt Higgins looked up from his Zamboni and said out loud to absolutely nobody, "Well, that don't sound right." Within 90 seconds, the alarm that started in the concourse had reached the tunnel where Walt Higgins kept his Zamboni idling for the second intermission. He heard the second scream before he saw anything, a high electronic shriek that did not belong to any drunk fan or rowdy bachelor party he had ever encountered in 11 years of work. Walt climbed down from the machine and walked toward the noise with the calm, unbothered stride of a man who had simply seen too much to be impressed by chaos anymore. What he found in the service corridor stopped him for exactly 2 seconds. Hask, the Dominion soldier, was on his knees, clawing at his own helmet, mustard dripping down the inside of his collar, and apparently doing something deeply unpleasant to his exposed skin. 2 more armored figures had arrived behind him, weapons raised, scanning the corridor with visible confusion. Walt looked at the scene, looked at his Zamboni idling 30 feet behind him, and made a decision that would later be described by arena staff as extremely Walt. "Y'all aren't supposed to be back here," he said. "This is a restricted access corridor." One of the soldiers turned its weapon toward him. "Identify yourself." "Walt Higgins, ice technician." "Who let you in without a credential badge?" The soldier did not understand the question, mostly because Dominion tactical doctrine had never prepared anyone for being asked about credential badges in the middle of an invasion. While the soldier processed this, Walt calmly walked back to the Zamboni, climbed into the seat, and started rolling it directly down the corridor at a top speed of roughly 9 miles per hour. Which does not sound fast until 8,000 pounds of steel and ice-shaving machinery is bearing down on you in an enclosed hallway. The 2 soldiers scattered, one dove into a supply closet, the other tripped over a stack of folding chairs and went down hard, his rifle skittering across the concrete floor. Walt parked the Zamboni directly across the width of the corridor, blocking it entirely, climbed down, picked up the dropped rifle, looked at it for a moment, and set it on the Zamboni's dashboard like a man putting his car keys in a cup holder. "Found weapon," he said into his radio, calling up to arena security. "Found 2 more weirdos in armor down by the visitors' locker room. You might want to send somebody." Up in the stands, Jimmy Caswell had abandoned his ladder entirely and was now standing near the scoreboard control room, staring at a live feed from the rooftop security camera, which showed something he could only describe to himself as a flying saucer parked on our roof like it owns the place. Jimmy had spent 6 years fixing every strange electrical issue this building had ever thrown at him, and he was not about to let some unscheduled visitor mess with his wiring without getting a closer look. He grabbed the only tool within reach that felt remotely useful, a long-handled cable splicer, and headed for the roof access stairwell. Meanwhile, on the concourse, word had begun to spread among arena staff faster than any official announcement could move. A security supervisor named Hank Dalton, a retired Marine who had worked arena security for 9 years, received 3 separate radio calls within 40 seconds, each one stranger than the last. Donna reporting an attacker neutralized with condiments, Walt reporting a Zamboni blockade. And now a third call from an usher near Section 104 claiming there was a robot guy trying to get backstage. Hank did not panic. Hank had spent 2 tours overseas and had developed a personal rule a long time ago. If something sounds insane, assume it is true and move fast anyway. He keyed his radio. All staff, this is Dalton. Lock down backstage and tunnel access. Nobody in unescorted. If you see anybody in armor that isn't ours, do not engage unless you have to. I'm heading to the concourse now. He grabbed the nearest available item that could function as a weapon, which happened to be an aluminum bat from the team's promotional display case near the gift shop, smashed the glass case open with his elbow, and started moving. Out on the ice, the game had not stopped. The third period clock kept ticking, players kept skating, and the crowd kept roaring. Completely unaware that a small but growing skirmish was unfolding in the hallways and tunnels beneath their seats. Commander Threll Vask, still positioned on the catwalk above the upper bowl, watched his tactical display flash warning after warning as contact reports rolled in from his scattered squad. "Status report," he barked. Korv's voice came back tense. "Sir, 3 units report hostile contact. Local civilians are armed with improvised tools." 1 unit reports chemical exposure from a yellow substance. Threll stared at the readout. "Chemical exposure." "From a food preparation worker?" "Yes, sir," for the first time since the mission began. Commander Threll Vask felt something he had not expected to feel on what was supposed to be the easiest landing of the entire campaign: doubt. He looked down at the glowing ice surface below, at the thousands of cheering humans who had no idea anything was happening at all, and made the decision that would define the rest of the night. "Deploy the remaining squad," he said. "We secure the central structure directly. Move to the ice." Down below, on the catwalk's edge, 4 more Dominion soldiers prepared to descend a cable line directly onto the arena floor, weapons drawn, ready to make contact with what their sensors identified as the primary gathering point of the entire facility. They had no idea they were about to land on a sheet of ice in front of 18,000 fans, 4 Stanley Cup final referees, 2 full hockey teams, and a 6'3" mascot who had been waiting his entire career for a moment exactly like this one. The Dominion soldiers descended their cable line at 10:02 p.m., dropping silently from the catwalk into the shadowed upper rafters of the arena before rappelling down toward the ice surface itself. For nearly 11 seconds, nobody in the crowd noticed them at all, because every eye in the building was locked on a breakaway chance unfolding at the other end of the rink. Then a Carolina defenseman glanced up while skating back to position, saw 4 armored figures dropping out of the darkness above center ice, and skated directly into the boards in pure shock. The referee blew his whistle for an entirely different reason than he expected to. Play stopped. The crowd noise shifted from a roar to a confused, rolling murmur as thousands of phones turned upward at once. The 4 Dominion soldiers touched down on the ice in a tight formation, immediately discovering the one thing their tactical training had never covered: ice is slippery. And armored boots designed for rocky alien terrain have absolutely no traction on a frozen rink. The lead soldier's legs shot out from under him before he had even raised his weapon, and he hit the ice flat on his back with a crash loud enough to echo off the rafters. The second soldier, trying to catch him, slid sideways into the boards. The third managed to stay upright for almost 4 full seconds before overcorrecting and spinning in a complete circle, arms flailing, weapon firing a stray pulse blast directly into the penalty box, which exploded into splinters and sent both teams' equipment managers diving for cover. The crowd, still uncertain whether this was some kind of elaborate promotional stunt, began to cheer. That was the exact moment Chance the Golden Knight, still in full mascot costume, decided this was the single greatest opportunity of his entire career. Marcus Doyle, inside the suit, had spent 6 seasons getting tackled by over-enthusiastic fans, dodging throne drinks, and absorbing body checks from drunk, season ticket holders who thought hugging the mascot was a contact sport. None of that had prepared him for what he was about to do, but none of it had unprepared him either. He grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a full-sized composite hockey stick from the team's bench rack, and skated directly onto the ice in his mascot skates, building speed. The 4th Dominion soldier, the only one still standing, turned just in time to see 7 feet of golden fur and oversized plastic armor bearing down on him at full speed. He raised his weapon. Marcus swung the hockey stick like he was clearing a path to the net, catching the soldier directly across the chest plate and sending him into a full backward spin before he crashed into the boards near the penalty box. The arena exploded into noise. 18,000 people, still convinced this was the most insane in-game promotion in Stanley Cup history, rose to their feet screaming. The Jumbotron operator, with absolutely no script for this moment, instinctively cut to a close-up of Chance standing triumphant over the fallen soldier, stick raised. And the crowd lost their minds entirely. Up on the catwalk, Commander Threll Vask watched the entire scene unfold on his tactical display, with an expression his second-in-command had never seen on him before. "Why," Threll said slowly, "is a giant golden creature defeating my soldiers with a stick?" Korv had no answer that would not get him reassigned to deep space cargo duty. On the ice, the 2 soldiers who had managed to find their footing began retreating toward the boards, weapons raised but completely unable to gain stable ground. One of them slipped again, this time sliding directly into the legs of a Carolina forward who had not moved fast enough to clear the ice, sending both of them tumbling in a tangle of limbs and armor. The forward, dazed but unharmed, looked down at the alien sprawled beside him, looked up at the crowd, and instinctively did the only thing professional athletes know how to do under pressure. He got up, raised his arms, and pumped up the crowd like he had just scored the game-winning goal. The roar that followed was deafening. Meanwhile, down in the tunnel, Hank Dalton arrived at the scene Donna and Walt had already mostly handled, aluminum bat in hand, only to find one alien soldier curled in a fetal position from mustard exposure, and another pinned beneath the front blade of an idling Zamboni. Hank surveyed the scene, looked at Walt, and said the only thing that felt appropriate in the moment. "You couldn't have called this in a little sooner. Didn't think anybody'd believe me," Walt said. Up above, Jimmy Caswell finally reached the rooftop access door, threw it open, and came face to face with the actual Dominion cruiser hovering 30 feet above the arena's retractable roof panel. Its hull humming with energy, lights pulsing along its underside. Jimmy stared up at it for a long moment, cable splicer still in hand, and said the only thing that felt true. "Well, I'll be damned." Then, with the same stubborn curiosity that had gotten him in trouble with every supervisor he had ever worked for, Jimmy started climbing toward the exposed maintenance access panel built into the roof sliding rig, directly beneath the hovering ship. Because if there was one thing Jimmy Caswell could never resist, it was a piece of unfamiliar technology asking to be taken apart. Commander Threll Vask made his decision in less than 4 seconds, which, in hindsight, was 3 seconds longer than he should have taken, and 1 second shorter than would have saved his pride. With 4 of his soldiers down on the ice, and 2 more neutralized in the tunnels below, he ordered the cruiser to lower its altitude and prepare a full tactical descent directly through the open roof panel. If subtlety had failed, he reasoned, overwhelming force would not. What Threll did not know was that the open panel he was targeting was the exact same maintenance access point Jimmy Caswell had just climbed into, and that Jimmy, in the 30 seconds before the cruiser began its descent, had already located the ship's external power conduit running along the underside of its hull, a thick, glowing cable that had drifted close enough to the rooftop catwalk for a determined electrician with a cable splicer and absolutely no sense of self-preservation to reach. "If this kills me," Jimmy muttered to himself, "at least it'll be a hell of a story." He drove the splicer directly into the conduit. The result was immediate and spectacular. A surge of feedback ripped backward through the ship's power grid, and every light on the Dominion cruiser flickered violently before half of them died outright. Inside the bridge, Alarms blared across every console. The ship lurched sideways, lost partial altitude control, and clipped the edge of the arena's massive exterior video board with a deafening crunch of metal and glass that could be heard 3 blocks down the strip. Inside the arena, the lights flickered once, twice, and the crowd gasped collectively, certain now that something had gone seriously. Wonderfully wrong with what they still believed was an elaborate stunt. The Jumbotron screen cut to black for a moment before stuttering back to life, now displaying a partial, glitching view of the cruiser's exterior camera feed by pure electrical accident. Showing 18,000 fans, an unmistakable, very real, very not a promotion spacecraft, tilting dangerously above their building. The crowd noise shifted again, this time into something between a scream and a roar of pure adrenaline. On the ice, the 2 remaining Dominion soldiers, watching their commander's ship lose stability above them, made the second intelligent decision of the entire Dominion campaign on Earth. They ran. Or rather, they attempted to run, which on ice, in armored boots with no functional sense of balance, looked more like an extended, chaotic belly flop toward the nearest exit tunnel. Security staff, now fully mobilized under Hank Dalton's direction, intercepted them before they reached the boards, tackling both soldiers with the kind of coordinated effort usually reserved for unruly fans who had jumped the glass during a game. Above the arena, the Dominion cruiser fought to stabilize, its engines straining against the damage Jimmy's improvised sabotage had caused. Commander Threll Vask gripped the edge of his console as the ship rocked violently. Watching his tactical display fill with red warnings, he had never seen activate during actual combat in his entire career. "Status," he demanded, voice tighter than he intended. "Power core destabilizing," Korv reported, fighting to keep his own balance on the shifting deck. "External sabotage detected at the primary conduit. Sir, I don't think this was a coordinated military strike." "Then what was it?" Korv hesitated. "I believe it was one maintenance worker with a hand tool." Threll said nothing for a long moment. Below him, through the cracked viewport, he could see the arena's massive crowd, no longer cheering in confusion but now pointing, recording, and screaming in a mixture of terror and pure entertainment, treating the unfolding disaster like the greatest halftime show in human history. He watched his own soldiers being subdued by an ice resurfacing machine, a woman with a condiment bottle, and a security guard wielding a souvenir baseball bat. He watched a being in an oversized golden costume standing triumphantly at center ice, hockey stick raised high. While the crowd chanted something he did not understand, but somehow knew meant celebration. For the first time since joining the Dominion fleet, Commander Threll Vask felt something close to genuine respect mixed with complete and total bewilderment. "Pull us back," he said quietly. "Full retreat. Get us off this planet before that creature in the golden suit finds a bigger stick." The cruiser, trailing smoke and sparks from its damaged hull, climbed unsteadily away from the arena roof, clearing the building just as the retractable panel groaned shut beneath it, sealing the gap Jimmy had so casually exploited. Down on the rooftop, Jimmy watched the ship limp away into the desert night sky, cable splicer still smoking in his hand, and allowed himself exactly 1 moment of stunned silence before keying his radio. "Hey, control room," he said. "I think I just won the lighting argument I've been having with my supervisor for 6 years." Nobody answered him right away, because every single member of arena staff was currently either restraining an alien soldier, mopping mustard off a concrete floor, or trying to explain to a very confused stadium announcer why the Jumbotron had briefly shown what looked like the inside of a spaceship. On the ice, play remained stopped. Both teams gathered near their respective benches in stunned silence, staring at the wreckage of the penalty box. The 2 subdued soldiers being escorted off by security, and the mascot still standing triumphantly at center ice, as if none of this was unusual at all. Somewhere in the upper bowl, a fan started a chant that would end up trending online before the night was over. "Chants for president, chants for president." The game somehow was not over. And neither, Commander Threll Vask would soon discover, was the consequences waiting for him back on his own ship. It took the NHL exactly 19 minutes to make an official decision about what to do with a hockey game, that had just been interrupted by an actual alien boarding attempt. After a brief delegation between officials, both team captains, and a visibly shaken stadium operations director, the league made the only call that felt right under the circumstances. The third period would resume, the score would stand, and a full investigation would follow once the game concluded. Professional hockey, it turned out, was not something either team was willing to let an interstellar incident cancel outright, not with a Stanley Cup on the line. The crowd somehow stayed in their seats. If anything, the energy in the building had only grown more electric. Fans who had been mid-sentence describing the game on social media were now trying to process footage of an actual spacecraft retreating over the Las Vegas skyline. Footage that was already being shared, analyzed, and debated across every platform on the planet before the final horn even sounded. Donna Pierce went back to her concession stand 15 minutes later, mustard bottle still in hand, and finished her shift like nothing unusual had happened. Though she did make a point of telling every customer who asked for extra mustard exactly why she was now, quote, a little possessive of the stuff. Walt Higgins backed his Zamboni out of the service corridor, resurfaced the ice during the next stoppage exactly on schedule. And when a reporter later asked him how he felt about single-handedly disabling 2 alien soldiers with farm equipment logic and an industrial ice machine, Walt simply shrugged and said, "Man's gotta keep the ice smooth. Wasn't gonna let anybody mess with that." Jimmy Caswell became, almost overnight, the most requested interview in the building's history. Mostly because nobody could quite believe a maintenance electrician had disabled an alien spacecraft using a cable splicer and pure stubbornness. When asked by a national news crew what was going through his mind in that moment, Jimmy thought about it for a second and said, "Honestly, I just wanted to see how the thing worked." Turns out it didn't like getting taken apart while it was running. Most things don't. Marcus Doyle, still inside the Chance costume for most of the post-game interviews because nobody could convince him to take the head off before the cameras stopped rolling, became an instant legend among hockey fans nationwide. Highlight clips of the Golden mascot dropping a Dominion soldier with a clean two-handed swing racked up more views in 24 hours than the entire Stanley Cup final broadcast combined. When a reporter finally got him to remove the mascot head for an interview, Marcus grinned and said, "I've been waiting 6 seasons for somebody to give me a real reason to use this stick. Glad it finally happened on home ice." Hank Dalton kept his answers shorter, as security professionals tend to do. When asked what training had prepared him for an actual extraterrestrial incursion during a championship game, he simply said, "None of it. You just move fast and figure out the rest after." He was later given a formal commendation by both the arena and, oddly enough, a confidential letter from a federal agency that never identified itself by name, thanking him for what it called exceptional civilian response under unprecedented circumstances aboard the retreating Dominion cruiser. Commander Threll Vask spent the long journey back to the fleet's rendezvous point, composing what would become the most uncomfortable after-action report of his entire career. He stared at the blinking cursor on his terminal for nearly 20 minutes before finally typing his summary, knowing full well it would be read by the Supreme General himself. The target structure, he wrote, was not a military installation. It was a gathering location for a regional sport involving frozen water, sharpened blades, and extreme aggression toward both opposing players and unfamiliar invaders. Civilian personnel, including a food vendor, a maintenance technician, a vehicle operator, a security officer, and an individual wearing a decorative costume, neutralized or repelled the majority of the landing squad without any apparent military training. I recommend this region be marked unsuitable for further engagement until a complete reassessment of human civilian capability can be conducted. Back at Dominion Command. The Supreme General read the report twice before looking up at his analyst, with the same tired expression he had worn through 2 previous failed landing reports from this particular planet. "Another defeat," he said, "by civilians? Yes, sir. At a sporting event? Yes, sir. The local population appears to defend recreational events with the same intensity normally reserved for territorial conflict." The Supreme General said nothing for a long moment. then quietly added a new line to the planet's growing intelligence file, right beneath the earlier notes about hostile livestock, predatory wildlife, and unlimited access to cured pork. Subjects display extreme, unpredictable defense of recreational and community spaces. Engagement strongly discouraged. Back on Earth, Game 6 ended just before midnight with the Vegas Golden Knights forcing a Game 7. The building shaking with a roar that had nothing left to do with aliens and everything to do with hockey. Outside the arena, the Las Vegas Strip buzzed with a different kind of energy than usual, tourists and locals alike standing in clusters. Replaying phone footage of the spacecraft retreating over the skyline, already turning the night's events into the kind of story that would be told and retold for years. Donna kept the mustard bottle. She had it laminated and mounted behind the concession counter with a small handwritten sign that read, "Defender of T-Mobile Arena, Game 6. Walt kept driving his Zamboni every single home game. Same as always, though arena staff swore the machine moved with a little extra confidence after that night. Jimmy got his raise, finally, after 6 years of asking. And Marcus Doyle never did put down that hockey stick again during a single home game for the rest of his career, just in case. Somewhere out past the edge of the solar system, a quiet message traveled through Dominion communication channels, a warning passed from one outpost to the next. About a small blue planet where ordinary people defended ordinary things with extraordinary stubbornness, and where a championship hockey game had somehow proven more dangerous to invade than an armed fortress. If you enjoyed watching aliens get humbled by mustard, ice machines, and a mascot with a hockey stick, smash that like button, subscribe so you catch the next story before anyone else. And drop a comment telling me which character you would want defending your hometown if the Dominion ever showed up. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.